Orleans for the Super Bowl. He made his way around the room saying many of the same things, including in a stop with the folks at Pro Football Talk.
I think we need another DN. I think we need another DB, and I think we need a wide receiver. Yeah, like I love the guys that we have in the receiver room. They all have potential to be one, but we need a guy that's proven to be one.
The Packers have spent draft capital at the position in recent years, taking Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson in 2022, along with Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks in 2023. But getting a true number one might need to involve either signing one in free agency or trading for one. Some have floated the idea of Devontae Adams returning to Green Bay after getting traded to the Jets in the middle of last season. Turning to the Badgers, a couple of their former players can have a chance to win a Super Bowl this Sunday. Linebacker Leo Chenal looking for his third with the Chiefs. Linebacker Zach Vaughn looking for his first with the Eagles.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
If you're interested in a rewarding career with a strong Wisconsin company, Rural Mutual Insurance is looking to add to their growing team of successful employees and agents. Apply online today at ruralmutual.com/careers.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, the Bucs have traded Chris Middleton. He is headed to Washington along with A.J. Johnson and a pick swap for Kyle Kuzma, Patrick Baldwin Jr., and a second-round pick. Middleton spent the last 12 seasons with Milwaukee, playing a major role in their 2021 title. Milwaukee is in Charlotte tonight to face the Hornets. And the Badgers off today, can be back to work tomorrow, start preparing for Saturday's trip to Iowa. They beat the Hawkeyes earlier this year. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil.
Check this. The president don't want to come watch us to the Super Bowl. Guess what? We'll go see him.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
Remember last week? I remember having this conversation last week about how you get so fat and happy during football season. You get so high on the hog having games. You know what? How many games do they have on a Sunday? I guess there's 32 teams, so it'd be about 16 when you factor in buys, and then Thursday, Monday night. What is there, like 12, 13 games on a Sunday? Like a huge slate. Then we come on the radio on Monday. We have so much to talk about, and then we got Monday Night Football, and then Thursday night, and then there's stories throughout the week. Like you get so used to having content from football, and then as soon as those games start to go away, like the Tuesday or Wednesday after the divisional round, and then you have conference championships, right? It gets thin. And I remember we were talking about this last week, like where did all the content go? It feels like we went from jam-packed 2 hours, we don't have enough time to get to everything, to nothing really to talk about. You know what I mean? Like we're really scraping the bottom of the barrel for Packers topics. Last week was slow. Remember, we talked about it. It's amazing this week. We get to Radio Row, and the show's barely even started at 10 o'clock on Monday morning, and Myles Garrett requests a trade, right? Holy balls. Today, 48 hours later, just before Bill's show starts again, we learn that Chris Middleton has been traded. Holy balls. We're going to talk about that. And then Josh Jacobs, who was at Radio Row today, he was on with Mike and Bill. He did a bunch of shows, and on every show he said basically the same thing. And Zach included it in his update. Packers need a true number one wide receiver. They need a proven guy. So now all of a sudden we're up to our ears in content. Where was all this content last week when we weren't surrounded by, right, the center of the football world and all of these guests? So it's just funny how we go from all the content in the world, there's football every Sunday, to nothing, to now this week where there's huge breaking news. Oh yeah, and by the way, Luka Doncic got traded out of nowhere for Anthony Davis and some small spare price. What's going on this week? I'm not going to complain. It's awesome content. I would have liked some of this last week when it was slow and we weren't surrounded by all these guests at Radio Row. My name is Grant Bills. This is the Wisco Sports Show. I'm really looking forward to the next 2 hours. We have some big topics to talk about, including the Chris Middleton trade and those Josh Jacobs comments. I want to begin with that. We also have a couple of guests that I'm really looking forward to. Mike Felger, 98.5 The Sports Hub, Milwaukee, born and raised, now is, if not the biggest, one of the biggest local sports talkers in the country. In Boston. He's going to join us just after 5 o'clock, just after he gets off the air of his evening drive show. Chris Myers, I am told, NFL on Fox, play-by-play announcer, been around forever. I'm told he's going to be here at 5:30, and I have no reason to think he won't be. In fact, I confirmed with his booker just a little bit ago
But until he's sitting at this table, I'm like, it seems a little too good to be true, right? Because that's kind of how Radio Row works too. You book some people, you don't book some people. But until Chris Myers is sitting there, what a cool conversation that would be. So I'm 99% sure he'll be here, but I still feel a little bit like I'm being punked. Coming up at 4:30, some of you are going to absolutely kill me for this. We're going to have a doctor on the show. Here's what happened, okay? I'm sitting here with Bill on Monday, and we're getting ready to start the show, or we were on commercial break or something. There was a lull. We weren't on the air. And this woman with a suitcase rolls up, and she says, "Hi, are you guys on the radio? Are you doing a radio show? Or are you here broadcasting?" And we go, "Yes. Nice to meet you, Grant, Bill." And she goes, "Well, her name is Cheryl Bruce Bryant, the celebrity doc," she calls herself. And she goes, "I'm looking to book myself to promote myself." And she's looking at Bill because, of course, Bill is the host. He's got this backdrop behind him. And Bill, savvy, goes, "Well, actually, that's Grant's department." And we could both tell, what use do we have for this woman? We're here to talk about sports. So he goes, "Well, you'll have to talk to this guy right here." Brilliant move. So now it's up to me to deflect. I can think of no reason. What I should have said is we're all full. That would have been such an easy lie. I said, "We have no room." And she would have kept moving. But what I said was, "We're full today, but come later this week, I bet we could squeeze you in." And what I thought is, this woman will get bored. She won't come ask again. She won't write down my information. And later in the week will never materialize. Well, she came back and said, "Well, it's later in the week. What do you think?" Again, I just should have said I was full. I don't know. I don't know. Okay. She's coming on at 4:30. I know. I was looking at her website. I know very little about this woman. Her website tells me that she's one of the 100 most influential people in the world. She's been seen on Fox and NBC and ABC. She's been featured in the New York Times. The website that I would imagine was made by her people would tell us that she's a big deal. So we're going to have fun with this. I'm sorry. I know the Cone Rollers and the Bodies and the LaCroix Butlers are going to barbecue me over this for months, okay? I'm sorry. I fumbled. I didn't know I couldn't come up with anything. I couldn't come up with a good lie. So she's going to be here at 4:30. And the best thing that I can think of is to ask her about Christian Yelich's back. Look, Cheryl, he's 33. Can we really expect him to return to MVP form? And if he does return to MVP form, will that make up for the fact that we're probably done every day at third base in Milwaukee? If she has a good take on that, then you guys aren't allowed to make fun of me, because that's a pretty bitchin' guess and pretty good spin by me as the host. So that's what's coming up. It should be a mixed bag, a very exciting, fun mixed bag. We're going to have fun with it. That's the point of Radio Row. Let's start with the Middleton trade. It broke around, 9:15, 9:20 this morning. I saw this trade. I saw the graphic on my laptop. That's how I first saw the news, the Shams graphic. And half of the picture was Chris Middleton, and half of the picture was Kyle Kuzma. And reading that tweet and seeing that picture made me ill. It made me ill. I hated it. The Bucks essentially traded a franchise legend, a player that helped them win their first title in 50 years, and not like he hit a couple of threes like Pat Connaughton, who he deserves respect for that as well, but not as much respect as Chris Middleton. Like, this dude, multiple times throughout that entire run, turned into Michael Jordan in crunch time and won games when Giannis was injured in Atlanta, right? Which we've learned in recent years, the NBA playoffs, a war of attrition. You need number twos who can occasionally roll up their sleeves and be a number one if the number one gets hurt. So Chris Middleton is a franchise legend, should go down as not just one of the best Bucks of this era, but of all time. I realize it's the Milwaukee Bucks. That's not a long list. He'll probably have his number retired. And they traded him for someone who dated one of the Jenners. They traded him for Kyle Kuzma. Okay. I hate this trade. And this trade makes me sick because this trade is so emblematic of the spot in which the Bucks have put themselves. It's not the trade itself. Like, it's not the fact that they got rid of Middleton and got back Kuzma, and I don't even know what did they get. They got Kuzma. They gave up AJ Johnson, and there was a pick, I think. Who cares? It's nothing that matters, right? It's not like, how could the Bucks not get more for Chris Middleton, and how could they unload him to save money? No, it's not. I understand that he's probably too old and can't play anymore. I get that. I get the financial implications. I get that moving AJ Johnson probably allowed them to keep a pick. It's like, well, we don't really want to give you our 2031, but we'll give you this slap. So great draft pick, John Horst, by the way. Excellent. Drafted a 19-year-old and traded him when he was 20. Excellent work for a contender, right? A team that's contending, right? It's not the trade itself that really crawls up my butt. It's that the trade is just a symptom. The trade is emblematic of the spot the Bucks are in, and it's not a good spot. The Bucks drafted Giannis, and then, hey, that was kind of it. They're like, that's good. Like, we're just not going to draft any more good players. And I'm trying to pull up their draft history here today. Someone sent it in a group chat earlier. I know it's here, so I'm going to scroll. I know it's here. I promise. Bear with me. Trust me, because I want to be able to name these names off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Their draft history after Giannis. I mean, had they hit one play, like if they had hit one player, here it is. Going backwards, A.J. Johnson, Tyler Smith, Chris Livingston, Marjon Beauchamp, Isaiah Todd, R.J. Hampton, Jordan Nora. Some of these players were traded, but still. Kevin Porter, Dante DiVincenzo, DJ Wilson, Sindarius Thornwell, Thon Maker, Malcolm Brogdon, Patrick McCaw, Rashad Vaughn, Norman Powell, Jabari Parker, Damian Ingles, Johnny O'Bryant, Lamar Patterson. Those are the picks that the Bucks made across 2 general managers because they went right from Hammond to Horst, right? You can get one. You couldn't get one player that was worthy of barely even a second contract. I don't know, Jabari got hurt, but still. Like, the trade itself does not bother me. I understand it. It's the fact that they're in a position to need to make a trade like this. Middleton is 33. I'm going to cite some of the stats and some of the mentionings from Eric Name's story today. He's played 23 games this season, averaged 12.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists, 23 minutes per game. And I just don't think that his ankles have bounced back the way that the Bucks expected or hoped or needed him to. I think they looked at this and said, this isn't tenable. Like, we need to get out of this. We need to get out of this business. Eric Name also writes, and I guess this is the part that matters, at least I'm told, moving Middleton and Johnson in exchange for Kuzma and Baldwin, Patrick Baldwin Jr., which, small note, if Patrick Baldwin Jr. now comes back to Milwaukee and this goes sideways and the coach gets fired, at least it won't be his father who's fired because, he didn't cut the mustard. Kuzma and Baldwin cuts approximately $7.5 million off of the Bucks salary table and takes them under the second apron, which opens greater roster flexibility this season. If Milwaukee wants to make moves before Thursday's trade deadline, it will still be prohibited from taking back more money that it sends out in any deal, but can now aggregate contracts and deals as long as the team doesn't bring in $1 more in salaries than it sends out. I did not even finish reading that stanza of words before I forgot the first part. This is another thing taking place in the NBA that's bothering me, is teams are making these trades. Chris Middleton for Kyle Kuzma. On its face, that doesn't really, why would a team do that? Or before the year, different circumstances, different players, but spiritually kind of the same. The Timberwolves, out of nowhere, trade Karl Anthony Towns and for Julius Randle and some other things. And everyone's like, why would they do that? And all of the basketball nerds, the analysts, the reporters, are like, actually, guys, this is great. This gets them under the second apron. Oh, okay. Well, sorry, I wasn't aware. Because the name of the NBA is to, of course, get under the second apron. God forbid that the team should try to win games and collect talent and win playoff games. It's okay. It's the second apron. I just feel like the NBA gets farther and farther away from the games that are being played matters to more. And this is, I don't like the salary cap stuff. I don't like the apron stuff. I don't like that the CBA has put teams and fans in this spot where teams have to make trades that are detrimental. And then it's spun as, this gets them under the apron. I don't get, the apron doesn't do anything for me. That means nothing to me as a fan. That doesn't improve the product on the court. That doesn't improve the product on my television screen. I understand it gives them more roster flexibility. All right. But that does nothing for me as a fan. So when a poor trade is made, everyone's like, but they're under the second apron. Great. That's great for the Bucks. That does nothing for me. And it does nothing for fans. All right. And I understand that's a little whiny. That's a little bitchy. But the NBA just kind of further is straying from, hey, the thing that matters, the games on the court and the results of those games. And that's evidence the other night. The Bucks just elected to play nobody. They're like, we will play nobody, and paying customers in Oklahoma City can take it up the rear end. Just a little bit. This bothers me. Thanks to Chris Middleton. Help the team win a title. Have fun in Washington, I guess. And I'll try to talk myself into Kyle Kuzma. Let's talk about Josh Jacobs' comments a little bit. He was all around Radio Row today, telling anyone who would listen lots of things, but among the things, and repeating over and over, kind of symptomatic throughout all of his appearances today, is the Packers need a number one wide receiver. They need a number one guy. They need a proven guy. And he went out of his way, like a good politician, to be like, well, I like the guys that we have a lot. It's nothing against those guys, but we need a proven veteran number one wide receiver. And I've seen some other Wisconsin radio stations. I saw 1250 The Fan putting out a topic for one of their afternoon shows, probably Sparky on Wisconsin Sports Daily, asking, well, how's this going to play in the locker room? I've talked about this in other conversations when we've talked about should the Packers go after a player like T. Higgins, which I think is a pipe dream, but just use it as a stalking horse for this conversation. Should the Packers try to go after T. Higgins? All right. Well, a year ago, I would have said no, because I like this group of wide receivers a lot, and I think they just need to play, and they need to get targets, and they need to grow. And I thought they would grow more than they did this last year. We are now to the point where we're not waiting for these guys to grow anymore. There's not time to be patient anymore. Can't go into this season thinking, well, if Jaden Reed just takes a step, if Dontavian Wicks just takes a step, if Romeo Doubs can stay healthy, that's too many ifs. This team is ready to win now. Look no further than the comments that Brian Gutekunst made at his end of season presser. This is championship winning time. So they can't go into this next season thinking, well, if these guys all take a step, if they take a step, great. You can't bank on it. Right? You can't set your watch to it. You can't assume, because otherwise we get into the season and it could be week 6 or 7 and the Packers are right back in the same spot they were at the end of last year, thinking, man, these young wide receivers, they have moments, but they're not consistent enough to win in big games or the biggest games against the best competition. So I agree with Josh Jacobs. Where I push back a little bit on the number one wide receiver comments and conversations is I still think it could be internal. Like the Packers could draft someone else or sign someone else, and maybe Jaden Reed in year 3 blows up and busts out. That's great. That accomplishes the same goal. I'm just saying the Packers cannot sit on their hands this offseason thinking and saying, well, if only these guys, no if onlys. No, but wait, there's no time to bet. There's no time to hope. There's no time to be patient anymore. It's year 3 of the thing. So I'm with Josh Jacobs. And I hope that a comment like this is heard by Dontavian Wicks or Jaden Reed. And it's like, yeah, we probably weren't good enough this year. And we need to be better next year. But I understand if the team is like, man, we can't wait on you guys. We can't assume that you guys are going to be something. We're trying to win now. And the expression that is used often, right? A high tide raises all boats. If you bring in another great wide receiver, a proven number one, or you draft a guy really high, well, that makes everyone better. So it's better for everyone in the long haul. But no, I thought Josh Jacobs' comments today about needing a proven number one, needing a guy, I think those are accurate. How they get to that number one guy, well, that's a topic of a different conversation, but I think he's absolutely correct. And I hope that Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks, just those two specifically, aren't so entitled to hear that and think, what do you mean? What do you mean? Did you watch the game? Go back and watch the film from this last year. Not consistent enough. And now we're to the point in this thing in year 3 with Jordan Love. Brian Gutekunst says it's time to win championships. We're to the point now where patience is out the window. Either get on the truck or you're getting left behind. We're going to take a 3-minute break. Lots of good guests coming up in tonight's show, and appreciative of Flipside Pub and Grill as well for allowing us to broadcast here in New Orleans. Super fun here in the convention center. Lots of NFL players, former NFL players around today as you get later into the week. Becomes more of a thing, so that's really cool. Chris Myers, Fox NFL broadcast is going to join us. Mike Felger, 98.5 The Sports Hub as well. Milwaukee guy, Sports Talk Titan, those guys set to join us. And also we're going to talk to a doctor who finagled their way onto the show because I didn't have an excuse. We're going to have fun with that as well. That's coming up at 4:30.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
It's the Wisco Sports Show. Welcome back. Segment number 2, day 3. Radio Row down here in New Orleans. Big convention center. And it's funny, right where we are, we're under a big air conditioning vent or circulation vent or whatever. And it's pretty chilly in here. I don't really get cold, but Bill does. This man is bundling up for a 4-hour radio show. We're down here. I guess we're in like the far right corner of the joint. Sirius XM on one side, a Bleacher Report. The Bleacher Report cube with the couches, people up there. And right behind us is a booth from the New Orleans Tourist Department or something like that. And they've been giving away food, which is huge because it's not like there's a food court here. You'd have to go out through security to get food and then come back. That's a whole process. So I've been going over and getting some food from the New Orleans booth. I had crawfish today. Crayfish for the first time. Crawdads. Mud bugs. And this nice lady showed me how to eat them. They gave me a little boat, and they put like 6 of them in there. I'm like, I probably just could have started with 2. 2 probably would have been fine. You know what I mean? Like 2, I don't need 6. So I sat down after this woman showed me how to eat them. They're pretty good. They don't actually really taste all that fishy. They don't really taste like seafood. It's more just like a buttery green. I don't know. It felt more like I was eating like a pistachio out of a shell. It's pretty delicious. I still haven't had any etouffee. I want to have some crawfish etouffee before I leave, but I did have some crawfish today. They're pretty tasty. At least that's basically the only interesting thing that happened to me today. We did have Josh Jacobs on Bill's show earlier today. Josh Jacobs making the rounds and making the comment repeatedly that the Packers need a true number 1. They need a real number 1 wide receiver. I don't think that necessarily means we have to go pay big money for an outside guy. We don't need to necessarily draft a star. I interpret and choose to talk about the idea of a number 1 wide receiver in performance week by week, right? And I've said this before. I don't know that the Packers need a true top dog. I think they need their individuals to be capable of being a top dog when the situation lends itself to it. And that wasn't the case last year. You know what I mean? 2 years ago at the end of the year, it was the case. Like, oh, the defense is kind of allowing Wicks to have some room, so he's going to have to go off. Or against the Cowboys, it was Dontavian Wicks' turn, or Romeo Dobbs' turn to go off, and he did. It wasn't really the case this year. And I know some people said, oh, those comments from Josh Jacobs, those are going to ruffle some feathers in the Packers locker room. Man, they better not. Otherwise, we got some defensive, baby-type players in the Packers locker room, because if they bring in another star wide receiver, well, that high tide is going to raise all of the ships, right? And also, how could Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks look at their film from this last year, especially in moments where they had opportunities to make plays and didn't? How could they go back and look at that and think, no, the team should just continue to be patient and trust that I'm going to become a star? it's year 3 with Jordan Love. It's not time to be patient anymore. I'm just going through comments and texts on the live stream, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, because I want to make sure I'm reading if you're commenting on any of this. Madtown Maverick says, I'd rather have a wide receiver that catches the ball than an immaculate locker room. Here's the thing. When you win, that stuff tends to work itself out. You know what I mean? I don't envision this really being a thing in the Packers locker room. Dontavian Wicks quote tweeted one of the comments on Twitter today was kind of some laughing emojis and a thumbs down. To me, that was just two guys joshing around. I think he's correct. And I think anyone who treats that comment as a revelation, I don't know that you're dealing in the reality that we saw last year. And maybe that means the Packers truly believe that Jayden Reed is about to be a star, and maybe he is about to be a star. I just don't think the Packers can operate on faith like that in year 3 of the thing, especially when Brian Gutekunst is talking about it's time to win championships. Well, if you truly believe that, man, like, I don't know that you can sit on your hands and just cross your fingers, although that would hurt, crossed fingers under your ass. I don't know that you can sit back and just say, well, I hope Jayden Reed and Dontavian Wicks figured out, and I hope that Romeo Dobbs' head is okay. Like, that's just a lot to hope for in a year that there's so much writing on it. We also have some comments about the Chris Middleton trade that I want to get to. And Tyler in Massachusetts, who I love your comments always, Tyler, gets to my point about the second apron. Buck should put up a banner that says under the second apron right next to the NBA Cup championship banner at Fiserv Forum. This is what drives me nuts about this current CBA. And it's just another thing that turns fans off currently about the NBA. It's another thing that detracts away from the actual product on the court. To say, well, we traded away Julius Randle, or we traded away Karl Anthony Towns. I'm talking about the Timberwolves. I know we just went to the Western Conference Finals, and we're as excited about Timberwolves basketball as maybe we've ever been before. Well, yeah, we traded away Karl Anthony Towns, but we got under the second apron. Go, okay, that might be great for a GM. That does nothing for fans. That's a disservice to fans, who at the end of the day are the folks buying the tickets, watching on TV, right, talking about the game on sports talk shows like this one. When it's about getting under the second apron, it's a disservice to the fans. That doesn't do anything for me. So the Bucs trade away Chris Middleton to get Kyle Kuzma in return, and everyone's like, "Oh, brother," eye roll. What a sad state of affairs in Milwaukee. If that's emblematic of the spot in which the Bucs have put themselves, like, it's rough. People said, but the Bucs are under the second apron. It's like, okay. Great. Is that going to help them win a title? Well, now they can aggregate salaries. Oh, okay. So now all of a sudden, a Bobby Portis, Pat Connaughton combination, some team's going to jump out of bed to take that phone call. Well, we can aggregate them now. I'm just so over it. The CBA blows. Eric Name wrote, moving Middleton and Johnson in exchange for Kuzma and Baldwin cuts approximately $7.5 million of the Bucs salary table and takes them under the second apron, which opens greater roster flexibility this season. If Milwaukee wants to make more moves before Thursday's trade deadline, they will be prohibited from taking money back more than it sends out in a deal, but it now can aggregate contracts and deals as long. I'm not even going to finish reading this. I'm bored. It's another part of the NBA that isn't related to there's a game on Tuesday, the good players should play, and the game should matter, right? And the NBA is seemingly getting further and further away from that. And we're focusing on this, that, and the other thing. Like, I want to talk about the games. I want to talk about the games on Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday. Instead, it's like, but they're under the second apron. Great. Raise a banner. Let me call and extend my season tickets. Now, I think coming up next, we're going to have a doctor. And I told you the story of how this guest came to be booked. She appeared out of nowhere on Monday and was like, hey, guys, I'm the celebrity doc. I'd love to come on. And Bill's like, Grant handles the booking. Talk to him. And I was like, I was eating a muffin. I was not prepared. She's not sports related. I don't really want her. But I couldn't think of an excuse. So I said, later this week. Circle back later this week, because I didn't think she would. And then she did. And somehow I still didn't have an excuse. So I'm like, Wednesday at 4:30. So if she shows up, this happened last year too, where I think I accidentally booked a Scientologist and I didn't realize it until afterwards. And I was prepared to do the interview and have fun with it. And then the person never showed. So maybe the doctor will never show. It feels like a coin flip, but possibly when we come back. Her name is, I'm looking at her website, thecelebritydoc.net. Cheryl Bruce Bryan, MD. A concierge physician who specializes in integrative wellness management and longevity medicine. Isn't all medicine on some level longevity? There's not a doctor in the world who's like, my health is not related to keeping you alive. Interesting wording. Dr. Bryant Bruce has been recognized in Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. I'm going to look up that article. She's president and CEO and medical director of Cheryl Bryant Bruce, MD, aka Elite Personal Physician Services. This sounds like a front. Now I'm kind of hoping she shows. I was dreading this, but now I want to pick at this. I want to ask questions, and I want her opinion on Christian Yelich's back. Can we get, because, and this is what I'm going to tell her, if Christian Yelich can return to MVP form, that's basically like adding an MVP in free agency. It'd be pretty big for the Brewers offseason. So maybe she'll appear. I don't see her. I'm not going to hunt her down. See if she appears out of the ether. 5 minutes, we'll be back. Chris Myers, NFL on Fox, going to join us in hour 2. Michael Felger, sports radio in Boston, titan of local sports talk radio. Excited to pick his brain. He's from Milwaukee originally, too. So 2 great guests in hour number 2. We'll see if this celebrity doctor guest show is coming up next. This will be interesting. We'll be right back.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Welcome back. Segment number 3, day number 3, Radio Row here in New Orleans. I feel a lot better today. I made a very, very conscious effort last night to not drink. That doesn't mean I didn't have any drinks. I went to dinner with Bukowski for the second night in a row, and I feel like I have to explain why here in a minute. But before we went to dinner, we were at the hotel bar. I had a Moscow Mule. Fresh, delicious, not very strong, but, something like a treat. I wasn't going to order a mocktail. I'm like, all right, Moscow Mule, that's better than a martini or an old fashioned, something that's a little stronger. So that's what I had last night. Went to dinner, went to the media party, which was very fun. Bill and Clemens talked about it a lot earlier. And then I went to bed, and I didn't get a ton of sleep, but the fact that I didn't have any sipping beers or any random drinks is huge. I feel a lot better today. Now, this doctor has not shown yet. I have in my notes that I told her between 4:30 and 4:50, and then parentheses, prefer closer to 4:50. I think I put her at 4:50 because I have to take a break at 5. So I'm like, well, because I didn't want her on. And if you've been listening up until this point, I accidentally booked this woman. She came up. I didn't have a good excuse. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, God, Cone is going to roast me alive. And so is Tony in Texas. But whatever. I don't have an excuse for this woman. So I think I told her 4:50 preferably. So then when she sits down, like, we have to be done at 5. Like, I have an endpoint. I know when it has to be over. So she's the celebrity doc. We're discussing this in the comments on the live stream. I just really... At this point, I feel like she has to show up. We need to experience this. So at 4:50, this is like last year when I accidentally booked a Scientologist without knowing it. It was like, this guy played for the Broncos once upon a time, and I took the sheet. I'm like, awesome, great, former NFL player, I'll take it. I'm a nobody here, doing evening drive here by myself. And then later on in the day, I started reading. I'm like, oh, he's plugging Scientology, which kind of would have been funny, and then he didn't show. So I feel like this is 2.0 of that. I did get dinner with Bukowski last night. Here's why, the second night in a row. This is something that Pete does. I can't tell if this is smart or if this is... I can't tell if this is a smart thing or if this is stupid. So what Pete does when he comes to the Super Bowl or when he goes to anything, and Pete loves to go to highs to see, Pete loves to peacock, right? Anytime he's traveling places, he was telling me this, what he'll do is he'll make reservations multiple nights at a couple different restaurants that he wants to go to. And he will do so without a plan of who he's going with, right? So he's like, I have a reservation at Le Petit Grocery on Tuesday. He has a reservation at Cochon Butcher tonight, or Commanders, I can't remember. He didn't have any plans of who he was going with. The idea is, well, once I get there, I'll reconnect with people and I'll try to find people to go. And now for the second straight year, Pete has found himself without someone to go with. So I just tap in. I'm the understudy. I'm the backup plan, which would be insulting. However, I've had some pretty good meals this week. Last night I had a seafood stew, and I don't even really like seafood that much. I always do this. Anytime I go to a fancy restaurant somewhere on a coast, I'm like, I'm going to get the seafood. I don't like seafood. It feels like I have ocean water sitting in my belly the rest of the night, and it's like kind of salty, kind of bilgy. You know what I mean? So last night I had dinner with Pete. That's enough Bukowski talk. Good God. And I know, Rick, I know you're a fan, but there's such a thing as too much Pete. For some, any Pete is too much Pete. But even for us Pete fans, some is getting close to too much. Text. Classic. Moscow Mule, says LaCroix Butler, as a grown man. Yikes. Moscow Mules are good. I don't get them often. But I wasn't going to get anything with like strong liquor. I know there's liquor in there, but it's a refreshing. I wanted something tasty. So calm down, LaCroix. Boathouse Tom says, as a non-NBA guy, explain the second apron to me like I'm 5. I don't even want to. The Bucks trading away Chris Middleton gets them under the second apron, okay? And in this last CBA, the way that the luxury tax is set up, and I'm explaining to you this in the most basic way possible because I don't care. I don't care. In this last CBA, the way that the luxury tax was set up was changed a little bit. So, like in the past, if you spend over a soft salary cap, you need to pay luxury tax, and that's going to make your tax bill go up. So there might have been some limitations that then is placed on the general manager in the front office. Some, nothing crazy. You can kind of go about building your team the way you wish. You just have to pay a big tax bill. So like the Warriors would pay, $200-300 million in payroll, and then they'd pay another additional couple $100 million in just luxury tax. But if the owners were down for it and the franchise felt that this is our window to try to win, it's worth it, then you could do it. And that allowed super teams to kind of stay together for a while. But any team could be a super team, right? If you just pony up the money. So in this last CBA, what happened is, okay, well, if you go a certain percentage over the salary cap, right? The first apron means you're going to start paying some tax, but you're also going to have some limitations put on you. If you go over the second apron, which isn't really like if you have 2 superstars and anything else, you're basically there. Well, now it gets really difficult to trade draft picks because they get locked into place. It gets really difficult to make trades because you can't combine salaries. For example, when you trade for a $60 million player, you need to trade out a $60 million player, but you can take 2 $30 million, right? It's like cribbage where you can peg and you're adding up the points. Well, when you're over the second apron, the only way that you can acquire a $30 million player is by trading away a $30 million player. That's tricky, okay? So basically in this last CBA, it became really difficult to build a stacked contender Super Bowl super team. Not Super Bowl, sorry, we're on Radio Row, force of habit. But that doesn't interest me because now teams like the Nuggets are trading away pieces from a championship contender or letting pieces walk because, well, we got to be below the second apron. And maybe that's smart long-term team building. I just don't think in the NBA you have the luxury of thinking 4 or 5 or 6 years down the road. If you have Jokic or if you have Giannis or you have Steph, like you can't think, well, this is better for the 4-year. Every year is a 1-year plan, at least in my opinion, the way that I think it should be done. Because if it doesn't go correctly and something goes sideways, will that player that you're planning around for 5 years, right? Like, well, he's not going to be here for more than 2. So these teams are like the Wolves traded away Karl Anthony Towns, bringing in Julius Randle in return to kind of reset their money and to get that's related to the second apron, which is dumb. That's not additive to the fan experience. What's good for fans, right? What do fans like? We like high caliber competitive basketball games in which the best players play. The second apron is not connected to that. You know what I mean? There's nothing to do. That's some mystical, magical, spreadsheet-based thing that is covered and that is attacked in front offices. We're not included. And I know some people are like really into the salary cap. That's a hobby for some people. It's kind of a nerdy thing. Like if you're a CPA or you're into numbers, maybe you're into that thing. But the majority of fans, we like playing fantasy. We like betting on games. We like turning on a game to watch it. Right? We like to see hardcore. We like to see high-flying dunks, and we like to see guys digging in on defense. We're already not getting enough of that in the NBA. And now the Bucks trade away, a cornerstone player, a franchise player, Chris Middleton, for Kyle Kuzma. It's like, but they got under the second apron. It's like, that's stupid. That's dumb. I want to ask Felger about that coming up in a little bit. Michael Felger, 98.5 The Sports, I'm going to join us. I believe Chris Myers from Fox as well. I got a confirmation text. I really struggle to fully feel like we're going to get good guests on this show with my slap face as the only one involved until they're sitting here. But I've got a confirmation text or two, so that should be fun. I do want to ask Felger. He's from Milwaukee. He's a Bucks fan. So we'll talk about this. A couple comments. Let's see here. I don't know who this is. This is interesting. My guy, that facial hair, you look like a trans man that just started taking testosterone. Interesting. All right. Warranted. Rick says, OMG, stop, Grant. Talking about the apron. We got a comment that asked. It's important. It's meaningful with the Bucks trading away Chris Middleton. And Rick also says NBA and MLB need a real salary cap. We don't have to deal with this crap in the NFL. You know what I mean? There's a hard cap, or the realist version of a hard cap, probably outside of hockey. I think hockey's got a real hard cap, and the NFL's like slightly less hard, slightly softer, but still pretty darn hard. at least a lot harder than Major League Baseball. There's no cap in the NBA where it's like, well, there's a salary cap, but if you go over a little bit, this happens. And then if you go over a lot, it's like, how about we just don't let teams go over? How about that? How about we do it like the NFL? How about we figure, because this is so convoluted and so messy. And it's not additive to the fan experience at all. It doesn't give us anything. That's not something that we can buy a t-shirt for. That's not something that we can hang a banner for. That's not something that we can watch on TV and be entertained by. That does nothing for us. So that's why I just tune it out. I just don't like it. And I know that Middleton is old, and like I understand why this trade was made. This trade bothers me more because it's emblematic of the spot in which the Bucks have put themselves by drafting no good players and trading away a bunch of seconds here for a player that didn't really help them. And then in 2022, I think that was maybe their best team of all. And then Chris Middleton gets hurt. It's like, oh God. I saw Marzian tweet earlier. Is this true? I guess it's true because Giannis didn't play in the postseason last year. We never got to see a single Dame Giannis Chris playoff game. That's true, right? Because Dame was only here last year and Giannis didn't play in the playoffs last year at all. Like, man, that's brutal. And it's reminiscent of the Nets, who it's like, we only got so many games of Kyrie, Harden, and Kevin Durant, or other teams that have tried to pair a certain grouping of stars together. Right? It's very reminiscent of other situations, and it's kind of depressing, right? I also, the A.J. Brown inclusion of this, like, we'll give you Chris Middleton and A.J. Johnson for Kuzma, and what did they get back? Patrick Baldwin Jr., who's a Milwaukee guy. I guess that's kind of fun, but it's meaningless in the grand scheme of things. Like, was that the Bucks' way of not having to give up a first-round pick? It's like, well, we don't want to give you a 2031 first, and the Wizards shouldn't want a 2031 first. That's 6 years down the road. What does that do for anyone? So they said, well, we'll give you A.J. Johnson. So, like, that draft pick, I guess you traded it away. You helped use that pick to offload Middleton's contract, but it's just like the way in which this front office just could not do anything in the draft after Giannis. They couldn't do a single thing right. It's probably not the only reason that this thing is starting to come apart at the seams, but God, it's got to be a pretty big reason. And there were some, biffed trades too, like the Mirotic thing. And, there's one other that I'm forgetting about, but now I don't really have a problem still with the Drew Holiday trade. I understand why they did it. It makes sense. A lot of people who are still like whining about that, it's like, okay, I think you're kind of missing the big picture. It sucks. I miss Drew, but it wasn't happening with Drew. Just like now it's not happening for Dame with other reasons. But also like all of this belly aching and all of this strategizing that Bucks fans were trying to do with this team. Since Dame has got here, they've been in one playoff series. It lasted, 6 games? And Giannis didn't play at all. It's just like, man. And I don't think Chris played in some of those too. It's like for all of the gnashing of teeth and all of the pulling of hair that we've done over this, we've gotten to see it in one playoff series. It's like, what a monumental waste. Hasn't had really a payoff. Haven't even really had a chance to see this thing in action, in battle, which is a bummer. And now Chris Middleton's on the friggin' Wizards. Like, that sucks. That's a huge bummer. Respect what he did for the team. Probably time to move on. I get it. It just sucks that it's like you are going to Washington. Although maybe Washington now wants to use him to mentor Johnny Davis. Might be something worth considering or thinking about. Just something worth thinking about. Maybe this is great for Johnny Davis. How does this impact Johnny Davis's legacy? Maybe that's something that we should be talking about a little bit more. We're going to take one more break. We'll come back the final segment of the hour. I don't know if this doctor's floating around. If I would have known she was going to no-show, I just wouldn't have brought it up. But I thought I was going to have to prepare the audience. I thought I was going to have to lube you guys up for a guest that was going to be kind of weird. So we'll see. She could appear for the last couple of minutes of the show. Appreciate Flipside for sending us down here. Going to have a couple live broadcasts at Flipside coming up between March and April. So I'll be sure, as soon as we're done with Super Bowl stuff and we're home, I'll be sure to let you know those days so you can plan to come out. I believe they're both on Fridays. Yes, I believe both of the shows that I planned are on Fridays. So you can do a fish fry, you can do a happy hour after work, right? Flipside, home of the 2-for-1 happy hour with 2-for-1 tap beers, house wines, and rail mixers. Nightly food specials as well, like cheaper burgers, wings, fish tacos, that sort of thing. And then, of course, this time of year, the fish fry. I can't recommend it enough. And if you're not a fish person, they do a bitchin' chicken dinner as well. That's an excellent option that still allows you to go out on everyone, with everyone else on Friday night. So can't recommend enough. Food and fun without the franchise. It's Flipside Pub and Grill, the north side of La Crosse, just across from Menards. We'll wrap up hour number 1 of, dare I say, a loaded Wisco Sports Show coming up next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Let's go sports show. Last couple minutes of the hour. Appreciate you listening. Should have a pretty loaded hour number 2 if things hold up. We don't have any no-shows, and sometimes that happens. But just after 5 o'clock, expecting Michael Felger, 98.5 The Sports Hub, Felger in Mass, which is maybe an opinion. I think it's an opinion that's pretty close to fact. The premier local afternoon drive show in the country, and he's from Milwaukee. So excited to kick around some Packers, Patriots, maybe some Bucks, a little bit of the Brewers. I want to pick his brain on a couple Brewers things. Maybe we'll be brief, and if he doesn't really take the bait on the Brewers, we can move past it. But I always like an opportunity to work baseball in there. And Chris Myers, the NFL on Fox. He's been with Fox since 2003, and that's actually where I want to start my conversation with Chris, because and anyone else who's around my age, maybe slightly older, slightly younger, folks who are 30-ish, maybe a little older, maybe a little younger, think of the continuity that we've seen at Fox over the years. And I know some play-by-play and color commentators have changed, obviously. And once upon a time, Tony Gonzalez was there. And like, there are some tweaks. But by and large, the crews on Fox who call and who are the studio analyst for Fox games, that unit has been together for about 20 years, a little bit more than 20 years. And basically my entire life, I have known the NFL on Fox through basically the team of people that are there now. And I think that's pretty cool. I want to start there with Chris when he joins us at 5:30. I also want to get into the nuts and bolts of what takes place in a production meeting, right? What kind of conversations do you have with coaches? Do they ever tell you things where you're like, holy crap, if that ever got out, or if I ever told anyone that would be groundbreaking. That's huge, right? I was talking with Clemens earlier today too. about the idea that these analysts or these announcers come into, say, Green Bay to call a Sunday game, and maybe they meet with the coach on Friday. And Clemens was just spitballing. I don't think he had ever had an experience that would back this up, but I think it's a reasonable idea to, at the very least, kick around. It's like, imagine the Packers have a crummy week of practice. Guys aren't engaged. Guys are banged up. They're coming off. I could see a world in which a coach sits down at the table with someone like Chris Myers, these play-by-play teams, these folks, and they're like, oh my God, you guys don't know like how difficult it's been this week. These guys can't focus. They're not practicing. It's been a mess, right? I wonder if they ever get vented to by head coaches. Like, I wonder if it ever happens. So we were wondering if this guest would show. And I didn't really know we were getting close to 5 o'clock. We got a couple of minutes. Let's talk with our celebrity doctor. I was telling my listeners, Cheryl, that I had an experience with you earlier in the week. You said, I'm the celebrity doc. I would love to come on and tell you about my business. So tell us about yourself. It's Dr. Cheryl Bruce Bryan, MD. How are you?
Well, I'm going to correct you because you did the something that everybody
Bryant
does.
Bruce? I said it backwards, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. And I have it written down correctly, too.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
It's because it's all one word.
Yeah.
But people hear it as 2 words.
Funny.
And so they start flipping that thing around every time.
So you're the celebrity doc. I'm looking at your website. What exactly does that mean?
Well, I was given the name the celebrity doc by the media, and that was because I was a concierge physician, and so I was working with some celebrities, but I'm also in entertainment, so I was doing movies and commercials and such. So one of the media people said, well, you're kind of like a double celebrity because you're doing celebrity medicine.
You're in 2 spaces at once.
You're in this other space of doing entertainment, so you're like the celebrity doc. And it just stuck. All of the media started saying celebrity doc, and it just stuck over the years.
It's a good name. It sticks. I think that carries. I remembered it from our conversation on Monday.
Exactly.
So, again, I was just looking at your website over the break. You've worked with kings and presidents. Am I reading that correctly?
Absolutely.
In what? And I'm sure there's laws, but in what capacity?
I worked as a consultant and advisor in the healthcare space.
Sure.
With a lot of them, it's been in the area of mental health, overall wellness. I am an integrative family physician, and I work with high achieving, high profile individuals and enable them to take control of their overall integrated health so that they are optimizing their holistic health. And that allows them to live a purposeful, abundant, long life.
Sure. And that's probably harder for people to do when they're celebrities in the public sphere or people under amounts of pressure. So that almost should be its own field of medicine, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it is interesting because, people always say, oh, well, they have money, they have fame, they have this, they have that. What do they have to worry about? Mm-hmm. But they have an incredible amount of stress. And I mean, if you think about it, you always, people think, oh, well, they're just flaky. They're committing suicide. They have drug issues. They have alcohol issues. They're dropping dead like flies right about now. And there is a reason for that because they live their lives under a microscope and they have incredible amounts of stress. And like what people don't understand about money, they're like, oh, you have all of this money and you're living lavish, this, that, and the other thing. But people with lots of money have huge bills. Yeah. And they have some extraordinary bills that most of us don't have. Even if we have our own businesses, most of us are small potatoes. We're supporting a few staff.
Sure.
These celebrities have organizations.
So I got to go. Can we talk for 2 more minutes on the other side of this break? I got to go in like 5 seconds. Yes. We'll be right back with the celebrity doc. I want to hear more about this. We'll be right back. I promise.
This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, Chris Middleton's time in Milwaukee is done. That's after the team has reportedly traded the 12-year veteran to Washington for Kyle Kuzma. The deal also sees the Bucks send A.J. Johnson and a pick swap to the Wizards for Patrick Baldwin Jr. and a second-round pick. Middleton has struggled to stay healthy the last few years, was averaging just 12.6 points per game this season, the fewest since his first year with the club. Injuries have also limited Kuzma this season to 32 games. He's averaging 15.2 points, 5.8 20 rebounds, 2.5 assists per game. The trade deadline tomorrow at 2. Milwaukee going to be at Charlotte tonight. Turning to the Badgers, they beat Indiana last night to improve to 18-5 of the year, 8-4 in Big Ten play. That's good enough for 4th place in the conference. They hit 12 3-pointers. They already have hit a double-digit number of threes in a game, more times than in any other season before this one. Coach Greg Gard says it's because they have so many guys who can beat you.
When you have 13 assists on 26 baskets, and that just shows me the unselfishness of this group, and that's important for a really good offense. You have to be unselfish and a willing passer, and they just want to find who's open from Wisconsin. That's their mission, who's open, and they have confidence in everybody to let it fly.
Wisconsin will be at Iowa coming up on Saturday.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
If you're interested in a rewarding career with a strong Wisconsin company, Rural Mutual Insurance is looking to add to their growing team of successful employees and agents. Apply online today at ruralmutual.com/careers.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, Wisconsin's losing its general manager for football. Max Steinecker has been instrumental in leading the Badgers' recruiting efforts the last 2 years, but he's leaving to take a job on USC's recruiting staff. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil.
Check this. The president don't want to come watch us to the Super Bowl. Guess what? Guess what? We'll go see him.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
Celebrity Doc is here. Wondering if she would show. She showed up, and I think just a minute or two more, because I want people to have an opportunity to go find your work or learn more, because I don't think it's fair to guess if you don't at least have an opportunity to send people where you would like them to send. So if they want to learn more about what you do and to read more, where do they go?
They would go to thecelebritydoc.com.
Mhm.
And for those of you who may have a hard time spelling celebrity, because a lot of people do,
I do.
You're going to start with the word the,
Mhm.
THECELEBRITYDOC.com.
You're a public speaker and you do some interviewing as well. Can they find that content on your website?
Absolutely, they
Awesome.
can. And I'm always open to speaking at various different engagements.
Awesome.
I am also all over social media under my name, Cheryl Bryant Bruce, MD.
Awesome.
And don't turn that around.
I won't turn it around again. Now I'm going to double and triple check. Well, I appreciate you, Doctor. Thanks for the time. Sorry, I was a little bit late.
Thank you. No
Awesome.
worries.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We're going to have Chris Myers, the NFL on Fox in just a little bit. And I want to talk production meetings. I want to talk about his many trips to Green Bay and how he's been a pillar of their NASCAR broadcast as well for a long, long time. So we're going to talk with Chris Myers in a bit. And it was an excellent day on Bill's show earlier today as well with Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs was telling everyone in this building that the Packers need a true number one wide receiver today. So it seems like we'll get back into that, and I'll bring you some of that audio later on in the show. Chris Myers as well. Maybe we'll pick his brain on that as well. Mike Felger, 98.5 The Sports Hub, standing by, going to be at the table in just a moment as well. And if you want to see him, and you should, the live stream, the simulcast, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, madcitysportszone.com as well. You can take a seat, Felger. Yeah, absolutely. Join me. Appreciate it. So Michael Felger is here. Absolutely. I can write my information down. So you're from Milwaukee.
I am.
Felger, which I didn't know when I started listening to your show. I had a friend turn me on to it, and I was living alone at the time, and I just loved listening to you blast your football team. Like, it became a hobby. It's like, now that I'm home, I'm going to make dinner, and I'm going to listen to these guys kill. And then I realized you were from Milwaukee, and I was interested. There's something very therapeutic about listening to you guys just blast your football team day after day when they've been bad, and they have been bad.
I'll tell you where it comes from. I grew up in Milwaukee in the 70s.
Yeah.
And so my father, his friends, whoever, as a little kid, the adults I'm watching the game with, all said the same thing. You know, every game was the same thing. It was a giant bitch fest about why the Packers sucked. And, you know, this is what I heard in my house growing up more than anything. But it was the most, 5 words I heard over and over again. Lombardi wouldn't have done that. Lombardi would do this. That would never happen if Lombardi were here. You know, like, that's all that I heard. It was just a constant bitch fest about Bart Starr, the coach, or, you know, whatever. Like, that era of Packers football came off the dynasty, and the expectations were high, and everyone in my house just bitched about the team. And so like that's I don't know. That's how it's ingrained in me.
Yeah, well, and people still reference that era with people my age who weren't around in the 70s and the 80s. There's two Packers fans. There's two types, those that were around in the 70s, 80s, and those who were lectured about the times in the 70s and the 80s. So I hear about it. I now have the pleasure to live through. How many years in a row now have you been on the air talking about the Patriots every day?
So, well, I covered the Patriots as a beat writer, newspaper guy from 1999 through 07, 08, in that range. And but I've been appearing on local Boston radio since that time, really, since 1999. The show that we have right now is in its 16th year. So the Felger and Maz show on 98.5 The Sports Hub is in its 16th year.
And it's been the same crew throughout, right?
It has
Murray and Maz. Was it harder to talk about the Patriots every day and make it interesting when they were nothing but good?
Yes.
Than it is now?
Yes.
Compared to when they're nothing but bad?
Yes.
It's two extremes that you've had. So
yes.
why is that?
But let me tell you, I feel justified in all the nitpick. I mean, when they were winning Super Bowls, we nitpicked the crap out of them. But let me tell you, all the things we nitpicked about them are the reason they suck now. You know, Brady left and it all fell apart because you wouldn't know it because there's so much winning, but they did a lot of things wrong.
Sure.
You know, they were not a really good drafting team. Consistently, there were some drafts that Bill hit through the, out of the park, but for the most part, he was not great at the draft. They were a team that didn't like to pay. They were kind of cheap with their money. They cut corners on their staff, and that was partly because Bill just wanted total control and he didn't want to have a lot of people that he had to deal with. So it was very autocratic, but so they cut corners on their roster. They weren't a good drafting team. They cut corners with their staff and staffing. And, we would call these things out in real time and it'd be like, well, you idiot, they just won. Go back to Wisconsin. I'm like, I know they won, but their draft still sucked.
Yeah.
And so they lose Tom Brady, and now all those things caught up with them. So I don't feel that bad in hindsight because I think we were on with most of our criticism. It was just that Brady covered it up, and when Bill had his fastball as a coach, the combination of Brady and Belichick covered up all their problems.
So does that make Brady underrated over the years?
He might be in some way,
which is insane because for so many years I resisted Brady because I wanted Rodgers. I'm like, I watched Rodgers do these things that Brady can't do, and that really put my brain in a pretzel. And now I'm looking back, it's like, well, knowing what we know now about the Patriots, maybe Brady would have actually won more other places, which was never what folks thought.
It's possible. I mean, it's hard to say he would have had more than 6 Super Bowls.
It would be hard.
I mean, so I still think at the end of the day, they maximized what he was. But I mean, anyway, you asked, how do we bitch about a team that's good? I mean, you find a way.
Ways.
Yeah, you find a way.
You nitpick, you find something in a soundbite or anything like that. So you still believe the Crafts. I hear you talk about this. You still think they have the capacity to be a good owner.
Yes.
Even if they're on a bad streak. So compare.
But there's so many dopey, unqualified owners out there that
I'm a Packers shareholder. So
okay. Well, me too. I'm a 2-time shareholder.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So yes. And the Packers are immune from this conversation. Thank God.
Isn't it great?
I think one of the great things about being a Packer fan is that I don't have to look up at some douchebag in the luxury box with a pocket square, get on his helicopter after a game, or threaten to move a team or whatever. It's like, that's refreshing. It's nice. But you look across the league and all these, it's mainly kids who've inherited the team who are imbeciles.
Yeah.
I mean, or just half-wits and have done nothing other than just be born and own the team. And, there's the kid in Vegas, the kid in Indiana, the guy, these aren't kids anymore, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. The kid of the original one.
Yeah. It's like these guys have done nothing other than be born and be handed the team. And the Crafts are not that. Okay. Yeah. Robert is largely self-made. Jonathan Kraft is a Harvard Business School. These are qualified, smart owners. I just think that they've lost their way in the last couple of years.
Bad streak.
I like to think they're in a slump, like a team would be in a slump or a player would be in a slump. They've just
an ownership slump.
They're in an ownership slump.
That's interesting.
They've just hit a rut here where they've made bad decisions, sort of compounded these bad decisions. I don't know the inner workings of their business, but they have held back on spending, both on the field and off. And I just think if they decide to invest themselves, both with real money and time and energy and their full capacity, that they're capable, good owners. But I do think they have to reestablish it because it's been a bad run, and I think their decision making has been at the heart of it.
They need to bust the slump. Yeah, and I do love the Packers ownership structure. I have a caller who refers to it as the 3-ring binder, right? It's just been passed down from person to person, and that's why. So Ed Policy is going to take over for Mark Murphy, and everyone's like, well, maybe he'll want to get his own guy in there. It's like, I don't think that's how this works here.
Is he related to Carmen Policy?
Yep.
No way. Is that right?
Well, he's been with the Packers since they've been grooming him for over 10 years now. They've shaped him up to be a Murphy clone. So with other owners, you think, well, this owner's going to want to get his own guy. And I just don't know that those typical ownerisms apply to the structure in Green Bay, which I think is a good thing, especially when you look, especially hiring season, you look at these jobs that are open. A lot of it is coming down to the owner and the situation you're going to. Brady being in full control in Vegas that's not something that was anticipated. That's excellent for you guys.
It's excellent for us guys. I think it's excellent for Vegas. I mean, again, Mark Davis.
Yeah.
Look at that guy.
Say less.
Is that some sort of captain of industry? If his dad wasn't Al Davis,
yeah, and
he wasn't handed the team, what would that guy be? He's selling auto parts or something. I don't say that disparagingly, but he'd be what? And yet he runs a $6 billion operation.
Yeah,
and walks around like a captain of industry. But there's so many owners like that in the league.
Yeah,
that the crafts are not that.
Michael Felger is here. Did the Middleton trade move you at all?
Can I ask you? Is this Milwaukee?
Yeah, this is Milwaukee. This is the whole state of Wisconsin, but yeah, Milwaukee too. Yeah.
So this goes across the whole. Where's the station located?
Milwaukee, Bills on 920. Our flagship is in Madison, La Crosse, Eau Claire. So he's a bunch of them.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And we're live, right?
Yeah, we're live.
Okay.
Yeah, can't swear.
Okay.
You guys don't swear. You're used to that. Is that ever difficult for you?
Yeah.
Don't swear.
Is.
Did the Middleton trade make you want to swear?
Yes. No. I mean, I like it. I think they're porked either way because
that's kind of what it feels like.
Because it's been obvious from day one that Giannis and Lillard don't play together. They don't play well together. When I watch their games.
You've given up on it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Big time. It's been a year and a half now.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you people tell me. You watch a little more closely than I do, but when I watch their games, I don't see them in the same action together. I don't see much pick and roll with the two guys. I don't see the high screen and roll. I don't see them playing off each other. I see them come down the floor, and either it's one guy's possession or it's the other guy's possession.
And even when it works, it's like, well, nothing else on it feels like, well, they'll take a nice step forward and then they'll take 2 steps back. You know what I mean? And then one of them won't play, and it's like, well, they never play together. And then they will play and they'll lose. And it's like, well, they're not used to playing together. It just feels like
they have no offense. I don't think they have no offense to me. And it's either just Lillard ISO or Giannis ISO. And I think Giannis has been way too ball dominant for way too long. It's like, and this is such an old, you've been playing this way forever, but it's like him handling the ball on the perimeter is
especially
just
when Dame's here now.
Yeah. I mean, what is that? And I think it's because Giannis wants it or demands it. I don't know. So, I mean, I think Middleton, I love the guy, but I think it's clear he lost a step here.
Yeah.
And
he had double ankle surgery this summer.
As he would.
At 33 or however old.
As you would think. A guy his age would come off the injuries. Why would he have the same burst? And he doesn't. So I think Kuzma makes him a little more athletic. But if those two guys, if Giannis and Lillard, I mean, it hasn't worked from day one.
Yeah.
It never. I mean, I can't even tell you a period of. Have they even had a week?
Yeah.
Have they even had 2 weeks where you looked at it and said, okay,
without a clunker,
it's clicked. This is working. This looks like high-end championship basketball, and we got it. I don't think it's ever looked that way for more than a half at a time. Never for a stretch of games.
No.
Since he got here. So, and I think it's because Giannis is absolutely plateaued as a player and a wonderful player and love him to death. But, people always said, well, when he learns how to shoot, when he gets that shot, look out.
Yep.
And he never got it.
It just never happened.
It's worse. I mean, his free throw shooting's worse. His outside shooting's worse. He still feels like pulling up and hoisting those threes every once in a while. It's like, what are you doing?
And it's funny because he can still go 36, 12, and 4. You know what I mean? Like he can still be. And it's the same with Luka. Like even these players, these high-end players who have limitations, they're still unbelievable. So it's hard to tell these guys that they're playing wrong because they've been awesome for so long. Is it weird? You tell me. Is it stupid if I ask you a Brewers question? Because
these are still my teams.
Oh, okay. So you guys smoke the Red Sox for not spending, almost like they should spend to spend. And I think with an ownership group like you have, like there's just a certain prestige. You should be expected to.
Yes.
Put the pedal down. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm curious, like if you were on the air in Milwaukee, The Brewers can't do that.
I know.
So can you beat up on a team? As a host, you almost have to say, guys, they can't. Like, is that where the competition starts? How do you host that show?
Exactly, because I would love to. I think all owners should be, they should be really scrutinized. So let's scrutinize. It's Anastasio, right?
Yep, Mark Anastasio.
Well, maybe we should scrutinize him. I mean, there's plenty of small market teams that just make money hand over fist. Does he collect revenue sharing money?
I'm sure on some level, his net worth is like $600 million. Like,
okay, so you know what? Maybe I would get on him. Like, I mean, because in Milwaukee, I get it, small market. I'm not asking you to lose gobs of money, but I would also say
to be reasonable.
If you're in it to make a big profit, you're in it for the wrong reason.
Sure.
Like go back to the whatever. Is he venture capital or is he
probably
hedge fund? I can't remember how he whatever. Go back to finance.
Sure.
If it's all about the profit margin, then don't own a small market baseball team.
Sure.
So if you're going to treat it as a passion play, and it's you're not just selling widgets, then don't expect the same profit margin that you would with your other businesses. You should be prepared to take a loss now and then. You should be prepared to spend like you wouldn't spend in other businesses. So maybe I would get on him. If he collects revenue sharing, like, I don't know. I mean, they've been so close and so good for so long. Good. I mean, I don't mean great, but they're on a nice run here.
A really nice run.
With a little extra money, are they that much better? I mean, so maybe I would get on him.
You have to get on him to a degree.
I would have gotten on him I never trusted Williams as a closer.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Never. You know why? I don't want a closer having his primary pitch, his out pitch being an off-speed pitch.
You want the gas.
I want gas.
Mm-hmm.
I want guys blowing guys away. I don't like closers whose primary pitch or out pitch is an off-speed pitch. You're asking for trouble. And boy, they asked for it. And apparently he was tipping it to boot. So Alonso knew what was coming, and it was the off-speed pitch. You can know the fastball's coming, like when Hader was in his prime. They know what he's throwing every pitch, and you're still not going to touch it because of the heat. So I never trusted him in that role. And I'll tell you that last loss.
I literally have it written down in my notes. I've seen my teams lose a million times. That I was ready to cry. I was home alone. I was ready to cry.
That hit me in the gut. That was one of the worst Milwaukee losses I've had in a long time.
It was a wild card series, Felger.
And I don't know why.
I don't either.
I don't know why that one hurt so bad. But that felt like my childhood growing up in the 70s with the Packers losing every freaking Sunday and the weather turning horrible and how sad and depressed it was. And like that's what that one felt like. That was an old school kick in the nuts kind of loss. That one. I don't know why that one hit me so hard.
When I was listening to Levering and Euchre, because I have an MLB at plate or whatever, the account where you can listen to and I thought it's the last game of the season. You know how many of these Euchre has left, and it's a national broadcast. I don't need to listen to Scamby or whatever his name is. And it was and now we know.
Oh, they put and Euchre was only doing like the 9th inning at this. Like
we learned that he was getting radiation treatment and then coming to the park like he was in pain.
So
he was doing anything he could.
Did he only do the 9th inning? Because I want to say that he wasn't on the whole broadcast.
No. He disappeared for a couple innings in the middle of the game. Like he was just the absolute minimum that he could handle or the maximum that he could handle, and it wasn't much.
Yeah.
And Levering and a lot of these guys knew, like this is probably one of the last times we're ever going to see Bob. That was part of it too.
That was a crusher.
And Yelich is in tears in front of his locker. And Murphy, I mean, it sucked. It sucked so much. And I heard you mention it the next day. And you're pretty good at not. I would be more obnoxious about my teams if I were you, but I get why you're that way.
Oh, you should hear me with the one that's driving everyone crazy now is. Well, the Chiefs are vying to become the first 3-time Super Bowl champ. I say, well, no. They're vying to become the first three-peat since the Green Bay Packers in 65 and 67.
Mm-hmm.
The football did not start with the Super Bowls. The NFL was a fully formed, elite, real league starting in the late 50s. So anyone who knows their history, I was talking about this today, so it's fresh in my mind. The 1958 championship game, Colts-Giants, was sort of like the line of demarcation. The 60s era NFL was a real league. It was a good league. And by the way, so when they won from 65 to 67, the last two were Super Bowls.
Yep.
So
it's not like it was in the 20s.
For people to treat this like it's the first three-peat ever is silly. No,
it is weird. It doesn't really bother me, but it is fun. Packers fans, it's fun to be elitist because you can stand on these hills and look down.
And listen,
the ownership thing.
I'm in Boston, and they stand on these 18 championships by the Celtics. The first one won in 1958 against like the Tri-City Riverhawks and the Fort Wayne Pistons and the Cincinnati Royals, and like. I'm like, okay, if you're going to say the Celtics have 18, the Packers have 13. So suck it. Like your 6 Super Bowls, neat, child's play. You're not even halfway to the most NFL championships, and that's in Green Bay. So I get obnoxious about that.
It's fun.
But I don't come in the next day and like bitch about Giannis or Williams or things like this. No one wants to talk Wisconsin sports.
That sucks so much. I'm glad that we're on the same page on that. Well, I could talk to you for an hour. I'm appreciative. Thank you for coming over. I know you just wrapped up a 4-hour show, so thank you.
Okay. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
It's the Wisco Sports Show. We are starting to approach the finish line of day number 3. Still another guest to come, Chris Myers. NFL on Fox going to join us in a few minutes here at the bottom of the hour. That's 5:30 for you radio outsiders. Talk NFL and a really, really impressive broadcasting career. Excited to chat with him. Thanks again to Mike Felger. He was great. And I'm glad that we have the same, I think, emotional read on what happened with Devin Williams against the Mets. That was a first round, that was a wild card game, that had the Brewers advanced, they would have gone to Philadelphia and then needed to advance again to go to the NLCS and then needed to advance again to go to the World Series. I felt that game. I think that game hurt worse. Stick with me, because this is the type of thing that Zach Heilprin would pitch a fit about me saying, okay? And Zach, multiple people would. I think that loss, forget the stakes, just how I felt watching it, it was worse than the Brewers losing Game 7 to the Dodgers in 2018. And part of that was because the Dodgers just pulled away, and by the end of that game, I was numb. But coming away from Game 3 against the Mets, like even an hour or two removed, like I was in pain. Like that sucked so much. And I guess looking back at it now, right, everyone in that booth, Levering and Euchre, kind of knew that that was it for him. And some of the players, Yelich did. I think Murphy obviously did. That it was a small, tight circle. And some of that reporting was shared. Who had that story? Had some great details a couple of weeks ago about who knew what, when, and what specifically with Bob Euchre's health at the end. But like that game sucks. That game sucks so much. I love his take about, he wouldn't like Trevor Hoffman either. Trevor Hoffman is the I guess the good answer to push back on when you say I don't want my closers out pitched to be a breaking ball. I guess Trevor Hoffman would be the example, I guess. I just think closers are so tricky. This is why Rivera is just kind of thought of in his own league. You can be a great closer for 6 months. You have one bad game in the playoffs. It means nothing. Right? It means absolutely nothing. So I don't know. It's a tough spot to be in as a closer. I'm glad Devin Williams is gone. I don't want to see him pitch for the Brewers again. It's not personal. It's just I can't do it anymore. It's like when Blair Walsh missed that kick for the Vikings. He might have gone on to have a great career as a kicker. Sorry, man. It just can't be here. I don't want to watch you anymore. Apologize. People like Felger on the live stream. That's good. People like, you need to make him regular guest. Do you guys know how big of a deal Felger is? And he's not like he's on ESPN, but like, yeah, he's good because he's a huge deal. It's the premier local sports talker in the country. I'm trying to go through here. Lucas says, I swear Felger was at my bachelor party. Well, okay, Lucas, comment with more information, because if it was 40 years ago in Milwaukee, he could have been. I don't know. Now I need more information. Tyler says, awesome spot. Yes, I agree. What was fun about that appearance was him trying to decipher in real time how much crap he would give Mark Attanasio. Like he was thinking about that like he'd never thought about it before. Like if I was on the air in Milwaukee, how much crap would I lob at the Brewers owner for being cheap? And there's a line of demarcation between, oh, he wasn't in on Ohtani versus, oh, we didn't want to spend a little bit for Ha-Seong Kim to prevent Oliver Dunn from being your opening day third baseman. You know, there are levels to this. But I do think there are situations with the Brewers, and this is what makes sports talk in Wisconsin difficult, right? Because sports talk is done lots of different ways, but like a facet of sports talk often is we are going to rip the teams for what they're doing poorly or yell at the teams for what they're not doing, right? That's a big part of sports talk. Well, with the Brewers, I've always found this so difficult because people are mad that the Brewers can't afford the best talent. It's like, guys, I know you want me to rip ownership and you want me to complain. He doesn't have the money. He has some money, and he probably has more money than they occasionally let on. But he doesn't, like, by and large, I listen to his show. They slam the Red Sox because John Henry's got complacent, and they don't spend, and they should because they have mountains of money. The Brewers don't. Could they spend for Ha-Seong Kim? Yeah. But what do you want me to do? Throw an absolute tantrum on the air that they didn't sign him? Right? I think I was critical enough of the Brewers when that happened, but then we moved on. I just don't know that you can do sports talk in the state of Wisconsin just banging on the Brewers every day for not spending when they truly, for the most part, at least on the level of a lot of other teams, just don't have the money to spend. I think that's a real quandary. It was funny to kind of watch him piece through that in real time. It's like, yeah, maybe I would rip the Brewers. Maybe not. I'm not so sure. Let's take a break. We'll continue the Wisco Sports Show next. I'm 90% sure we're going to have Chris Myers from Fox talk about his NFL coverage. He broadcasts everything. There's always a chance he could no-show. Let's just operate like he's going to show. I got a text from his booker, so I'm hoping he'll be with us next. It's the Wisco Sports Show live at Radio Row. Thanks to Flipside Pub and Grill, just across from Menards on the north side of La Crosse, home of the 2-for-1 happy hour, the fish fry, nightly food specials, and Saturdays and Sundays as well. I love going to day drink on a sunny, cold winter day. Get inside, get a bloody or a screwdriver or a mimosa, get some breakfast food. It's the place for that as well. So appreciative of Flipside helping us to go to spring training or the Super Bowl or whatever. We're going to take a quick break, continue the Wisco Sports Show live from Radio Row next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Welcome back. It's the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bill. Appreciate you listening. Appreciate you being here. Thanks to Michael Felger, the celebrity doc. How about that? This is like last year when I accidentally booked a Scientologist, and then the Scientologist no-showed. So it's always something special and interesting on Radio Row each and every year. We're going to be joined in just a moment. Chris Myers, Fox Sports. Appreciate a little information on the guest. This guy's been calling football games. He's been synonymous with Fox on my television my entire life, and that's where I want to start with him. Like, that Fox team has been together forever. So let's go to him now. Chris Myers is here. Chris, you're making the rounds. I appreciate you joining me.
Thank you for having me on. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. So the first thing I noticed when I started, wrote a couple things down. What do I want to ask Chris about? You've been at Fox since 2003. So I was born in 98. My entire life watching football on Fox has kind of been the same. It's been the same crew. Like, is that kind of a pleasure to be able to say that? And there have been small changes, but it's been the same analysts working together and broadcasting football games on Fox for a long time.
Yeah, except for, and I worked a lot with Troy Aikman and Joe Buck, Aaron Andrews, right, and they moved over. Great for them at ESPN, and they've made Monday Night Football back to the great project that it is. But Tom Brady having a chance to get him in the broadcast booth has changed things just a little bit. But the crew, the pregame show when we have our seminar, and I work with Mark Schlereth, Mark Sanchez, different analysts through the years at Daryl Johnston, and we all get to hang out. And once a year, we're all in the same place before in the off season when we go over rules and the season ahead. It's a lot of fun. And I think viewers' continuity matters. And as you said here,
yes.
I mean, you're a young guy. I was at ESPN through the 90s in my early years where I began, which I talk about. I have a book out called That Deserves a Wow, which addresses that. And then I can't believe I thought I'd be there my whole broadcast career, but as Fox grew, had the opportunity to work a Super Bowl and work on World Series on the actual network broadcast. And so I can't believe the amount of time that's gone by. But yeah, continuity, seeing a regular face, matters. And here, just like hearing a Jim Nance or a Mike Tirico, some of the guys, and there's a great guy. I worked with Tirico back in the early years at ESPN. I won't leave any names out, but the Fox crew has been together with certain additions, as you said, but basically that main core, they get along well, and they know where each other is going in a broadcast, and try to serve the viewer the best way we can.
It's a lot of the same music and the graphics. Like, I can think back to when I was really, really young, and I'm watching the Packers and the Lions or the Fox game on Thanksgiving, and it's a lot of the same faces. How much do you think the viewer at home enjoying a broadcast crew and feeling like, you hear this a lot, that's a big game announcer, how much of that is just they've done a lot of games and we're used to them?
Yeah, that's a good question. That and I think that having done, I've done the big games, my old slogan is every night's the Super Bowl, so I treat every game that important, because the viewer and the team, for those, it is important, and it should be to us doing it, whether it's two teams that aren't contending or two teams playing that for the right to go to the Super Bowl. So I do think when you get the best game, you get a great crowd, you get a good matchup, even if the game, you get the best stars in the game. So the announcers, they have to be on their game, but you're already ahead of the game in the eyes of the viewer, because you're turning in, you're already excited. It's like going to see a comedian, unknown in the nightclub versus Jerry Seinfeld. He's going to be funny, so you're already ready to laugh with him. So, but any football game to me, and that's why I don't look. I love the business enough, and having done radio in a number of different roles, from studio host to Sports Center to calling games at sideline, but calling an NFL game is such a rush that you can prepare, and it's great, and then you get out there, and it truly is live, unpredictable, and you have an analyst to play off it. It really is fun. I mean, and that's why it's natural, I think, to get excited and call a game that way.
It feels big every time, even if it's maybe the smallest market of the entire. It's still a regular season NFL game.
Yes,
and there's no comparison in any other sport really, because they're all so huge. And I know you're here with Mueller, and I want to ask you about that. tell us about the process of calling a game. So let's say you're doing Packers Bears on Sunday. When do you get into town? What's the production meeting like? Just kind of paint the picture for what your job outside of those 3 hours is like.
Yeah, and that's what's cool about it, because unlike being the home team announcer where you already know your team all the time, you're with them, we get different games. So let's say I have a 49er Ram game Sunday. On Sunday night, the next schedule is the Bears Packers, where I get that game. I'm already looking at, on the flight home, the roster. If I haven't done a game this season with those teams, and it's early in the year, I'm already going over the numbers, the rosters, the players, the starters, reserve, that type of thing. iPad, I can actually watch the game that they just recently played. We have access to coaching video. We get clips sent from our researchers. They'll already be sending those in from the game they had or 2 weeks ago, or certain profiles on players. So it really starts then. So anyway, you get home, you get a break, a day or two. You usually watch the game you just did to go over things that
you're breaking down your film too.
Yeah,
cool.
I do that. Some guys don't like to, but I've always done that. Even when I did, a local newscast, I go back and watch it to make sure, hey, the highlight here, the emphasis there. Sometimes you
find it productive.
You could overanalyze, but I think it's worth to watch. And people can tell you, hey, check this or watch this, so that you're sharper. And don't call it too early. Don't be in a rush if the penalty to guess. Wait for the official. Those kinds of little things that just to make it more comfortable for the viewer. But then you're, after Monday or Tuesday, maybe some day off, you're talking to the producer about, okay, so we're going on Friday to Chicago or Green Bay, wherever the game was, for Friday's practice. This is how our crew likes to do it, because they like watching it, and then we meet with them afterwards. But we're deciding who do we want to talk to in our production meetings. We have access. And then Wednesday, Thursday, you're pretty much zeroing in on that week's matchup with both teams. Who's hurt, who you're going to talk to in the meetings, what statistics, what graphics do we want to jump on early. Friday, the home team, so let's just say it's the Bears, we would go to their practice, meet with their top 3 or 4 guys, quarterback, coach, coordinator, whatever, a few other stars. No cameras, but they're very comfortable with us, and that really gives us a feel for the game.
And that's earned, I suppose, over the years of meeting with these coaches. From
trust, yes. Like Kyle Shanahan's a guy, he'll tell us something really, candid and say, don't quote me, but if you're wondering why this guy's not in the game, it's because he's a whip when it comes to blocking. So just say, you guys word it the way you want. But so that's very helpful, and they trust you. And then the Saturday, the visiting team comes in, and we meet with them, and then we have our kind of a production dinner in the evening to go over the material from those teams, and then add it into the broadcast with the guys in graphics, the guys in stats, and then we hit it Sunday, and then usually you can get home by Sunday night, depending upon the game you have. And I always root. They tease me because the crew works all day, but I always root for overtime. They're like, oh, we're going to miss our flight. But to me, if you get overtime in a game, that means it was a good game and both teams were in it, and you're going to have chances are you're going to have a dramatic finish one way or another, unless it ends in a tie, which can happen as well. So that's kind of the process, and it's a fun process, because I would be watching games anyway as a fan, and I would care. I would be, hey, great, I'm doing a Jet game. I'm going to sit down with Aaron Rodgers and hear what he has to say, and they're much more candid in those meetings without cameras and recording.
Yeah, well, and lastly, I want to pick a little bit more on that as a sports fan, and I can't imagine all broadcasters are the same level of sports fan. I'm sure it varies. Like, I'm a broadcaster. Maybe I'm not as nerdy as a fan, but even in this job, like, you just talk to college coaches, local college coaches or whatever. Coaches and players are some of the most interesting people. When you ask them questions, they just think about things from different angles and they give you tidbits. So I'm sure if you're a big fan, you'd be watching the games anyways. What an awesome opportunity to just pick the brain of the people who control and coach in the game that you love.
Yeah, and as much as I love sports and football, I also am a big fan of interviewers. I mean, Johnny Carson growing up, I know it's a different generation, whether it's Letterman or Larry King or Howard Stern.
Love King.
There's styles of interview, and I always look like, how did he get that out of them? And so if people are comfortable, they usually reveal things. There's an old line from a movie that I have used in my career about approaching interviews, because I interviewed Muhammad Ali at 16, one of my first interviews when I was doing radio, which was a little intimidating. But it is treat the regular guy like a star, and a star like the regular guy, and that way you're not intimidated, but you also don't overlook somebody who may be interesting or have a story to tell. And so I kind of use that approach with athletes, coaches, players, whether it's Patrick Mahomes or we're talking to the third string tackle, pregame before the game, reporting on the Super Bowl.
You do so many different sports. Like you're a pillar of Fox's NASCAR. Is that a fun challenge? You sometimes wish that you could settle into just do one thing, or is it fun to cross sports and maybe use different parts of your vocabulary, your cadence that you wouldn't otherwise?
Yeah, no, I like doing different sports. I think I look, the NFL is my first passion and love, but when that season ends, we can still talk NFL, but I love covering baseball, and then NASCAR. I like the role of the pre-race show because I get to talk to drivers. The access is great. I get to talk to our analysts, and then the race unfolds. And it's fun that way. It keeps me sharp as a fan and as a broadcaster. And sometimes I need to compartmentalize when they overlap. But it's always think of the viewer in mind about what they want when I go out to do a broadcast.
It's a lot of time on your feet. You're traveling a lot. You're here with Mueller, so tell me a little bit about that before you go.
Yeah, Mueller Sports Medicine. They've been around for more than 60 years.
Yeah.
Professional athletes have used, I'm sure you've seen knee braces, they have arm braces, anything with pain relief, but they do it the right way. And they recently, the last couple of years, the FDA has approved innovative on their part. It's essentially, I'll just call it a leg boot sleeve you would put on each leg, and you can have this at home. They have it at some high-end gyms and training centers for the pros, but regular guys who get tired of walking or playing pickleball or basketball or hiking or just somebody who has circulation problems in your legs, it'll do a couple of things. Number one, it'll relieve any pain, and you can plug it in and adjust the pressure you want, the compression, for 20 minutes for a few nights. So it relieves the pain, and then it also re-energizes. So if you played a lot of basketball or tennis and you were hurting, but you wanted to play the next morning, you have this during the evening, and it'll give you that strength and take away any injury risk or further injury risk or pain, and you'll be able to play the next morning or the next day. So it's for the weekend warrior. It's available at Walmart.com or MuellerRevive.com, and now you can have it at home, and other people can use it in the family. My wife's a big pickleball player, and she uses it because she plays pickleball nonstop and needs to re-energize and ease the pain in her legs.
Well, Chris, you're a legend. We've heard you on sports in our houses for a long time, so thanks for the time. I appreciate it, man.
No, thank you. I enjoyed the interview.
Yeah, well, we'll take 3 minutes. We'll be right back. Wrap up next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
It's the Wisco Sports Show. Last couple minutes here in New Orleans. Some legit Packers news, some legit Bucks news today. There's a lot to talk about. Not that we necessarily need it. I began the show back at 4 o'clock saying, like, why could we not get the breaking Bucks news or the breaking last week when nothing was going on? We're surrounded by guests. We're surrounded by people who are making news, doing interviews, and we just get breaking news after breaking news. The Luka Doncic trade, which took place, was that Saturday night into Sunday morning, which was probably the biggest transaction in the NBA in forever. And then Myles Garrett requesting a trade, which feels like it was a year ago, because since then, Chris Middleton has been traded, which is huge for us in Wisconsin. And Josh Jacobs, while this is less significant, this is more like sports talk radio breaking news fodder than it is making national headlines. But Josh Jacobs going around to all the shows on Radio Row today, including Bill and Mike earlier, basically saying, we need a number one wide receiver. We need a proven guy. And the reason that I don't love saying the Packers need to go get T. Higgins, or they need to, the reason I think I'm having a difficult time getting there is because I was so high on this group coming into last year. My priors on a collection of Wicks, Reed, Watson, Dobbs, and Kraft, we'll throw them in there too, even though he's a tight end. My prior opinion, my belief in that group was so high, and my belief of, they don't need a clear-cut number one because they have so many good individuals. It's really hard for me to reverse course on that. Now, I also wasn't as nuts as some of you, my fellow Packers fans and owners, when it's like, we're actually better than the Vikings at receiver because, you guys have Justin Jefferson. We have 5 guys. Well, look, there's lots of different ways to build a great wide receiving core, right? Like, I think Jordan Addison is better than any individual the Packers have too, but let's just say Justin Jefferson versus, Reed, Wicks, Watson, Dobbs, Kraft. Like, I still think those are both very good ways to building a passing attack and to building a team. But I'm really having a difficulty saying, everything we said about, the Packers wide receiving core was wrong last year. I still think there was some truth. I still think there is truth in, you don't need a clear-cut number one. You do, however, and this is where the Packers came up short last year, you do need individual guys, maybe that's 2, maybe that's 3, to be able to step up and have a number one type performance when the matchup dictates, when the matchup gives them an opportunity, right? And last year, that was the issue. It's not that Jaden Reed wasn't the superstar every game. It's not that Dontavian Wicks was a flop every game. It's that game by game by game, I would look at this individual game, and you look at who has the best matchup. It's like, guy didn't really get it done. And then the next week, it could be the same problem with a different player, right? I think if you're going to do wide receiver by committee, and I think it is a good strategy, I think it's viable, your individuals need to be able to pop up at any given moment and give a number one wide receiver level performance. Romeo Doubs did that against the Cowboys last year, right? Watson, back to his rookie year with Rodgers, did that plenty. He got white hot down the stretch, and maybe start to finish wasn't there, but I think that year he was. But even if Watson, had a quiet week here, a quiet week there, he was still capable of turning it on when he was given an opportunity based in the matchup or based in the game plan or whatever. That was their issue this year. And I don't think that issue is necessarily solved and perfected by simply getting rid of, or I should say bringing in T. Higgins. Would probably help. But I still think the internal development from Reed and Wicks, let's focus specifically on those two, is still so crucial to this team's success. I'm not punting on those guys in favor of going to get a number one, but getting another great guy, maybe a proven guy, to use Josh Jacobs' terms, it would probably make a big difference. Rick points out something good on the live stream, and I this isn't on the lead. This isn't the headline, but it definitely makes the story. Josh Jacobs also talked about how we're a couple pieces away. We need a defensive end, we need a pass rusher, and we need a corner. I think we know that, right? And I also think defensive end, look, that internal, that improvement could come internally, right? Maybe they don't need to go get a stud, a star. They just need to take or get a leap from an individual guy. The problem is you can't really go into the season in year 3 on faith with multiple positions. You can't say, well, the pass rush will be good if, and the wide receiving core will be good if. Now, this is year 3. The last 2 years were, well, let's ride it out with this young group of guys, give them opportunities and see who pops, right? I'm still very much a believer in lots of their young talent, but year 3 coming up, going on Brian Gutekunst's words, it's time to compete for championships going into year 3. Year 3 is not for waiting and seeing. Year 3 is, hey, come along and develop and play well if you're about it. But if not, you're getting left behind, right? Because the train is leaving the station. We're not sitting here and waiting and watching and giving you every opportunity and every target. We don't have time for it anymore, right? It doesn't match the window anymore. This last year I was perfectly fine with just leave it to Dobbs, Watson, Wicks, Reed, and Kraft. Just throw that group at the wall. Something's going to stick. And if not across the entire season, then week by week, someone will stick. And it didn't really turn out that way. I would like to go back and see what this season would look like had Jordan Love never got hurt, right? And tweak some other variables. But I mean, that's ifs and buts, right? This next year can't be what last year was. We're just going to sit back. We love our young talent. We're going to throw it all at the wall and see what sticks. Because if this coming year you do the same thing and nothing sticks to the wall, then you've wasted a year, right? From last year to this year, you've wasted a year. And I think they're going to target, Rick, to your comment and to Josh Jacobs' comment on shows all around Radio Row earlier today. They're going to address corner. They have to. I can't believe they got as good of corner play this last year as they did. And maybe that's a testament to Jeff Hafley and some of his staff, which is why Hafley got an interview and members of his staff were poached for different positions around the league, right? Campanile got a defensive coordinator job. There were some quality assistants that he brought along. Like, I can't believe that the Packers went in saying, we're going to trust Eric Stokes and we're going to trust Jair. That's insane to me that they did that. And the fact that they got even workable cornerback play, forget average or forget acceptable. The fact that Eric Stokes was able to suit up and play as many games on any level that he did, like, I thought they got lucky. And that's not to say that they got high-level corner play. So that's obviously something that's going to be addressed. Of course. They don't have a choice like maybe they thought they had a choice this last year. Defensive end and wide receiver, they could have a choice, and I'm interested to see how they attack those two positions. If Myles Garrett ends up getting dealt, or, if Max Crosby becomes available, I think Khalil Mack in free agency becomes more interesting because now the most aggressive, the most desperate team is going for Myles Garrett. The next most aggressive or possibly desperate team might go for Crosby. And then, oh, look, here's the third choice, Khalil Mack, who's still a pretty good choice. And I think in some given off seasons would be the number one choice you could have for a lesser price because the most hot and bothered teams, the most desperate teams or aggressive teams, maybe desperate carries a negative connotation. It's not bad to be aggressive necessarily. But the Packers could potentially be third in line and still get a really good player on the pass rush. The wide receiver position, I'm still not sure. Because I think so many Packers fans like, well, you need to get a proven veteran. And then the Packers could bring in someone who's a proven veteran and everyone would be like, well, that guy sucks. Like Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He's some level of proven veteran. I'm not telling you he's a star, but he's played in the league and he knows what's up. But if they brought MVS back, maybe a la Devin Funchess a couple of years ago, it's like, well, that's not what we meant. Okay, so do you want them to do when you say proven veteran, do you mean star? Well, that's going to cost a good amount of money in trade to acquire or signing, right? Like I just, those two positions, I think, are the opportunities the Packers have to take a big swing. Pass rusher, wide receiver. And I'm glad because those are two really fun positions. Those are two fun positions, fun players to talk about, game wreckers, highlight makers, right? One on each side of the ball. It's going to be a fun offseason to talk about. I'm glad it's not like, well, they need a guard and they need a safety. Don't get me wrong, Xavier McKinney was a fun ad, but if we get to spend the next couple of months talking about what can they do at receiver, what can they do at edge rusher, these guys are stars. These guys are names that around the league we know. We've seen their highlights. Wide receivers, we roster them and we play them in fantasy. That's fun. So if the Packers have opportunities to take big swings at any position, those would be my two favorites for the purposes of the talk show. And I just think for, entertaining Packers conversation for fans. Forget a talk show. It's just more fun. It's just more interesting. So those are the two opportunities they have to take big swings. Corner, I just think they need to draft a bunch of them. And Nixon's on the team. I think Nixon can play a role. I don't like that he's demanding to be cornerback 1. I don't like that he's a role guy. It would be like Micah Hyde back in the day. If Micah Hyde's like, no, I won't do this. I'm only going to do that. Well, that detracts from the value of a player like Micah Hyde, who can kind of fit in wherever and get in wherever. I need that from Nixon. So I hope if he ends up being the slot corner or maybe the boundary corner number 2, well, then you supplement the rest of the position with draft picks. You have a little bit of a veteran, right? Carrington Valentine's still there. I think this team is in a good spot, but wide receiver and edge rusher, those are the 2 opportunities they have to take a big swing. And that's fun because those are 2 really fun positions. I'm looking forward to talking about that more. We'll be back tomorrow at 10. Bill will be back. Jermichael Finley starts the show at 10 o'clock. How much fun is that going to be? We'll talk Packers with him. I will be back tomorrow at 4. Thank you for listening. You can replay the live stream and the podcast. I'll talk to you tomorrow at 4.